I've been involved in football all my working life, starting first as an apprentice at Fulham, then spending 8 years at Spurs, followed by a spell in management at Brighton. There are few Football League grounds that I haven't visited. Every ground can tell its own story, be it the humble surroundings of Bootham Crescent, York, or the vast stadium at Old Trafford. As a player, I know that each ground creates its own atmosphere, and you, the spectator, will have experienced the tingle of anticipation felt when visiting a new ground. But your visits are like to only consist of a brief view from one area. In the next 70 minutes or so, we aim to show you the big changes that have taken place during the last few years, and also some of the hidden corners, the dressing rooms, the view from the players' tunnel, the overall impression from the TV gantry, and let you meet some of the characters at these grounds. In this cross-section of old and new, large and small, we will visit first the far north, and at the end, the mecca of them all, Wembley Stadium. So come with us now on this football journey to some of the football grounds of England.
Where are we off to first then, Dave?
It's up to the north-east and St James's Park, the home of Newcastle United.
St James's Park is just outside the city centre, and set on high ground, the stadium can be glimpsed between the high-rise blocks.
Pretty impressive entrance.
Yes. Well, I suppose the first thing is to go to reception and get permission to go inside the ground.
Fans familiar with the ground just a few years ago wouldn't recognise it today. And the most unusual crush barriers to be seen anywhere will no doubt soon disappear as the remaining terraces are developed into seating. Three sides of the ground have now been rebuilt and are fully covered. To fully appreciate the size of the ground, a view from the top of one of the stands, a climb of 127 steps, is necessary. There is still one large hole to be filled at the Gallowgate end, which, when completed, will completely shut out the view of Gateshead on the other side of the Tyne. As St James's Park itself was reconstructed, the manager rebuilt the team. And the evidence of past glories can be seen in the trophy cabinet. The compact museum is well worth a visit, where exhibits cover the period from the early days through the 1950s and on to the present. Kevin Keegan, the current manager, receives a rapturous welcome from the Toon Army on his return to St James's Park. The writer Cowper once said, "Newcastle, let me tell you, sir, has not his equal anywhere," a sentiment that could be applied to St James's Park in the not-too-distant future. behind the scenes, there's a strong feel of history. Many a decision has been made in the boardroom, and no doubt discussed over a good lunch in the executive dining room. But it isn't only the Middlesbrough team that have earned rewards here. For back in the 1950s and 1960s, the ground was packed for several FA Amateur Cup semi-finals and replayed finals played on the Ayresome Park turf. On this occasion, locals Crook Town went on to beat Hounslow Town in the 1962 final after drawing the first game at Wembley. Superficially, the ground has changed and now reflects a hue of red throughout, the borough's colour. But the remaining terraces will never be converted into seating areas. A brand new stadium is planned for completion in the summer of 1995 and will accommodate over 30,000 spectators.
My first recollection of Middlesbrough, Ayresome Park, was playing against the famous Brian Clough. And I happened to kick him in the game, actually. And as he got off the floor, he said, "Do you realise who you've just kicked?" And I said, "No, what's your name?" And he said, "Brian Clough." And I said, "I've never heard of you."
Further south lies the cathedral city of York and the modest ground at Bootham Crescent, where the local team have played since 1932. York City have been involved in some stirring battles over the years, not least in 1955, when the club reached the FA Cup semi-finals, a very rare event for a then third division team. Seats are gradually being added, but there's still a long way to go. In this match, during the 1992-93 season, York City entertained Colchester United, who just returned to the Football League.
York City. Oh, I remember going there as a manager of Brighton, not as a player. And Wilf McGuinness was the manager, ex-Manchester United manager. And he tried to get the game off because the ground was in bad condition. But with some gentle persuasion with the referee, we got the game on and we happened to beat York and get promotion that year to the second division.
This looks like a fairly large ground.
It is, but they'll be leaving it soon for a new stadium next door.
A bleak winter's day in Huddersfield. No match tonight, and no more at all at Leeds Road after the end of the 1993-94 season. Despite the falling snow, it was still just possible to view this famous old ground, which has many memories of a glorious past. One particular item of note is the barrel-roofed cowshed end and its unusual timber lattice support beams. Opposite the main stand is the massive covered terrace. The ground in total once crammed in over 67,000 spectators for a match versus Arsenal in the FA Cup. Behind the scenes, the club have a modest trophy cabinet. The star exhibit being this shield that commemorates the club's hat-trick of First Division championships in the 1920s. But tradition will take a back seat when this innovative, ultra-modern stadium is completed. Will the club ever rise to the heights again? If they do, then at least they will have a brand new ground worthy of such a status.
Huddersfield Town reminds me of great characters. The first one I ever came across was Bill Shankly. Nobody remembers him being literally the manager of Huddersfield Town. And then the great Dennis Law that I saw play at Huddersfield, score 6 goals against Charlton and the game abandoned. And then such players as Frank Worthington and Trevor Cherry. And my own experiences there, never ever went to Huddersfield and got a result. Lost every game, Tottenham, Fulham and everybody.
It's difficult to imagine a Football League team playing here at the former Alexandra Meadows, but Blackburn Rovers did for 2 years from 1878, where they also staged one of the first floodlit matches. On the other side of town, the club's home at Ewood Park since 1890 looked very different just a short time ago.
Football drama is concerned, the system is perfect for that. Oh, and Gunner! More drama. In the very last minute. And Palace thought that they'd escaped with a 2-1 result.
But now, millions of pounds later, Ewood Park has changed beyond all recognition. And when this final side is finished, the ground will have become one of the most dramatically changed and best stadiums in the country. And all this development and rebuilding work will have been accomplished in little more than 2 years.
Blackburn Rovers will always be something special, I think, because it was Terry Venables. When Terry Venables came from Chelsea, it was his first game away from home. We won 1-0 and went off to America the following day.
Liverpool's Anfield and the famous Cup then, Dave.
Yes, but not for much longer. It'll be an all-seater stand next season.
Probably the most famous entrance of any club ground. Bill Shankly, who was also encountered at Huddersfield, was a hero to the Liverpool fans and is still revered by everybody connected with the club.
It was the biggest rout the First Division has seen for years. Crystal Palace, fresh from the Second Division, weren't that bad. Liverpool were simply brilliant. And into the second half, Palace's punishment continued. Gillespie from the corner. The 7th was a superb Barnes free kick. The 8th, a header from Hussein. And the final flourish, another special from Nicol. This season, Liverpool don't intend losing the championship on goal difference.
The most famous feature of the ground itself is the Kop, a vast covered terrace which will soon be converted to seating. It's shown in sharp contrast here, where old meets new, at the junction with the modern main stand. A view of the Kop not normally seen. This structure is vastly different from that expected of a normal and traditional stand. Liverpool has, of course, a tragic side in its history. Those who died in the Hillsborough disaster are still remembered, and the name of the road in Sheffield will always be linked with that fateful Saturday in April 1989. A vast amphitheatre, now complete and able to hold over 40,000 fanatical fans. Old Trafford, where else? Every view from within the stadium presents a similar image of vast rows of covered seating, advertising the sponsors and the club itself, with the inevitable predominant colour of red. Apart from the players and officials, there are few that are allowed to walk upon this famous pitch. And a view from the centre spot presents an awe-inspiring vista, even when empty. Imagine the trepidation felt by the opposition team when the stadium was full with fervent supporters, creating a veritable wall of sound. It's through this tunnel that the players appear on the pitch, to be greeted with a deafening roar from the multitude of cheering fans. And off the pitch, the fans over many years have been rewarded with countless awards and trophies, which have been won and presented to the club. They can all be viewed in the excellent museum situated within the Old Trafford Stadium complex. On most days, groups of eager visitors are taken on half-hourly tours around the stadium to see not only the playing and surrounding area itself, but also some of the backstage scenes, and to where each match day starts and finishes, the changing rooms, where the various kits are laid out to view. And to the baths, where after 90 minutes of entertaining, those famous names can luxuriate in a hot bath and ease the aching muscles. The manager and his entourage are raised well above pitch level, instead of in the usual low-level traditional dugout. And high up in the rafters, a glorious view of the Old Trafford playing area is presented, a view familiar to the many millions of television viewers. The most revered man of all, who will never be forgotten for his accomplishments and his genuine love of the club. The man who, amongst his many other achievements, in a few short years, built the famous Busby Babes team, which even now, over 35 years later, is still remembered with affection. Duncan Edwards, Tommy Taylor, and all the others who tragically lost their lives on that dreadful February night.
Manchester United, one of the Mecca grounds in the world, let alone this country. The atmosphere was absolutely fantastic. Wonderful place to play.
On to the present, and a young supporter who may be just lucky enough to see at close range one of his or her heroes. On this occasion, Mark Hughes. The attendance today may only amount to a couple, but be it only 2 or over 40,000, Old Trafford is a ground never to be forgotten by those who have once entered its portals. Bramall Lane, where traces of old architecture combine with modern stands.
I think looking back on the grounds that I've seen in amateur and non-league football and in professional grounds have improved beyond all recognition. A lot of them, particularly in the Premier League, are superb stadiums, the pitches are good, the facilities are different class, and a lot of money's been spent on it. Regrettably, at the other end of the level, the amateur grounds that we used to play in, that were very, very good grounds in years gone by, really have fallen behind. That's why Wycombe have done extremely well to move away from Lokes Park to Adams Park and built a new stadium, which is much better. Those stadiums that 20 or 30 years ago were okay and were good stadiums now really look derelict, really, and it's hard for those non-league clubs to compete because they're not going to get the money from the Taylor report, by means of the Taylor report, in terms of the Football Trust. They get improvements, but their stadiums are disappearing, so really the gulf is even wider than it's ever been. In my time at Bramall Lane, the stadium's always been regarded as a good stadium, but a lot of it has been derelict. We've had a new cop, which one can see down that particular end, that's been replaced in the last few years, and that's been, cost £2 or £3 million, of which we've had grants, and there's further developments to go. We are intending to, the other end where the supporters' end is, the away supporters, we're putting more seats in there and improving that side, and again, on the far side, the John Street stand, which is over all that side, is to be redeveloped, but it costs many millions of pounds. So we've made reasonable strides in my 6.5 years here. The pitch has improved, we've adjusted a lot of things, we've got a new cop which was standing, which is all seater now, and we're making other developments. Before the start of next season, the Wave supporters end will have seats underneath, that will be closer to the ground, and then there is development to go along the John Street. Now whether we can get the whole shooting match done before the start of next season remains unsolved because it's going to cost a lot of money, but certainly we will make progression in that way. So Sheffield United Stadium is improving along with all other clubs who wish to be top clubs in the Premier League.
Sheffield United, what a lovely stadium it is now, but I can remember playing there when it was three-sided. It was used as Yorkshire Cricket Ground as well. Very, very late in the game, if we were ever winning there, which we never did for 32 years, we used to kick the ball as far as possible onto the cricket pitch, so it would take ages to come back and get one of the little ball boys to chase it.
Beside the peaceful River Trent lies the City Ground, the home of Nottingham Forest. With the necessity of having to match up the different roof levels of the stands, a unique, if somewhat quirky, view is presented at the Lady Bay Bridge end. But nonetheless, this enclosure and the rest of the ground is now all seated and ready for big match action in the Premiership once again. Under former manager Brian Clough, many exciting matches were played in the past, in the days before such large-scale redevelopment took place. A peculiar situation in respect of the club is in its name and that of the other team over the river. For while Notts County is on the opposite bank of the Trent and in the town rather than the county, the city ground of Nottingham Forest is not in the city proper, but rather in the county.
I can always remember Nottingham Forest. They were all good footballing sides. You could play good football against them, and the happiest time, I suppose, at Nottingham Forest is when we beat them after a record run of 45 games for Forest, undefeated.
Chester's ground's a long way from the town centre.
That's because it's a new ground.
The Diva Stadium may not be the biggest or most impressive ground in football, but all credit to a lower division club who, despite financial struggles, were able to relocate and build a home that well satisfies their needs. A unique situation is presented here, for half the ground is in England and the other half in Wales.
Chester means a lot to me because I went to buy a young centre-forward there many years ago when I was manager of Brighton, but I missed out on him, and his name was Ian Rush.
Another club yet to hit the big time, despite having been formed way back in 1877.
The stand looks pretty old.
It is quite a contrast to the new ground at Chester.
The main stand, of mostly timber construction, is an interesting reminder of the past. But modernisation hasn't been forgotten, and recent developments include this seated stand at the railway end.
Crew looking for that early breakthrough with Jones's free kick, and here comes Stuart Evans. Well, Crew have made a promising start to this game, and he's onside here, and this could be two. Unlucky, but Evans is still there. It's in the net a second time. Well, Newcastle have really been caught out in this match, and Srinicek punches it out, but not very far.
Unfortunately for Crewe, Newcastle clawed back and won that game 4-3. The office block in the distance marks the site of the club's former Nantwich Road ground, where an FA Cup semi-final was once staged.
Crewe Alexandra. Oh, what a ground, Gressley Road. I remember going there many years ago with Tottenham when we drew 2-2 and then took them back to White Hart Lane and beat them 13-2. Great recollections.
Aye, the ball is flying. The lads play heart and soul. The stand stands up, the keeper stands up to keep the goal. So wrote Houseman in his famous poem, A Shropshire Lad. It would be difficult to find a more idyllic setting for a football ground than that of Gay Meadow, the home of Shrewsbury Town in Shropshire. Shrewsbury Town is a relative newcomer to league football. They won election to the old 3rd Division in 1950, and the ground still sports a half-time scoreboard, a fitting reminder of that era. There's one spectator at Gay Meadow who's been present at every match but has yet to see a game. Sir John Wakeman has stood in the grounds of the adjacent school, oblivious to the action taking place on the football pitch. With the River Severn running parallel to the enclosure, the nearby trees in full leaf, the fresh green grass, and the blues and golds of the seating in the main stand, the ground presents a colourful image, though it's far from a big stadium, since the largest crowd ever at Gay Meadow was less than 19,000. One interesting historical feature is this turnstile, which dates back to the 19th century, when it was located at the old Crystal Palace. Being close to the river, balls often have to be retrieved, previously by Fred, now 83 years old.
I was watching this match and the ball went over into the river. I knew it went over into the river, for sure. You've got to make sure, like. Went and fetched the coracle, took it down the river, and when you put this ball with the white balls at night time, pitch dark, and I spotted it as I saw it. Gets in the boat on it, follows it down, and the river, by the way, was pretty high. Bit of water on the was. Followed this ball down, and instead of me getting any nearer, it was going farther away. I thought, well, I was with a bit of speed on, testing the paddle a bit more. Still no effort, no nearer. I thought, oh, I'm shortly coming down to the weir. The weir is the Russian water lake. And I thought, well, can I get much farther, 20 yards? I'll be over the weir myself. So I bent down to see if there was any water in the boat, and all of a sudden, this bloody way, it was a swan who got up and boom, boom, I didn't know what to do. One way or one the other. And luckily I didn't turn over. If I had it, I wouldn't have been here now.
Oh, I used to love playing at Shrewsbury. And I used to tell the players in when I was a manager there that if we were winning, to kick the ball in the river, and a guy in a little coracle used to go after it and bring the ball back.
We're heading for the Midlands now, and Wolverhampton.
Has there really been so much change, though?
You'll see.
Like the wolf on the fold, gleaming in gold, wrote Byron, and the predatory creature watches over the new Molyneux, peering through the early morning mist.
Do I not like that?
Meanwhile, the large cantilever stands crouch, as if ready to pounce upon an unprepared visiting team. Vast changes have taken place over the last few years, as the groundsman explains.
Well, in 1976, we started to develop the ground. And by developing the ground, we built the new stand, which is behind me now, which is the John Island stand, which was built at the other side of the road of Molyneux Street. So in front of that were a row of houses, a road, a grandstand, and then in 1978, when it was finished, we took the road out, we took all the land out at the side and in front of it, and we made a piece of land which was something like 56 yards of turf in front of the John Island stand. And in that time then, where we're standing now was like the old cowshed, which was the north bank, and where that new Billy Wright stand's been built now, that was the plain area. So then the Waterloo Road stand was at the back of that onto the main road. The stadium is complete as 28,500 all-seater stadium, but as you can see, that the bits and pieces are being done now. We've got a video wall there, and we're putting another one up there now. As you can see, the builders now are putting another video up on that corner as well. So, like within the near future, we will have that video wall there, and we shall also have one there. But hopingly, and if we're successful, and we are going to be successful, of course, Sir Jack has said that he will fill that corner in immediately. So, like at the end of the day, we'll be then onto 30,000 plus all-seater stadium. Without Sir Jack Hayward and his family, then we would have been struggling to have a stadium as beautiful as this.
The club's glorious past, represented by cups and trophies, can be seen in the main entrance foyer, together with historical souvenirs. There are also memories of past great players, not least, arguably Wolves' greatest son, Billy Wright.
Sir Jack Hayward took over. He was the multimillionaire that loves football, loves Wolves, and he got aboard with Jack Harris, the chairman, and we all went away match. Well, I used to go and watch the matches then. And he came up to me one day, he said, I'm going to take over the club, Bill, and one of the first things I would like to do is invite you to become a Jacker. Would you accept it? And I said, oh yeah, please, that's made my life then, because that's the full circle. So I'm a director there, and it's all happening at Molyneux.
Wolves, I remember getting beaten 9-0 on one occasion at Wolves, and the manager came up to me afterwards and said I'd played well.
St Andrews is, or was until the end of the 1993-94 season, a little changed ground, apart from some improvement work and additional seating. The latter, of course, all in blue, as befits the team with that nickname. The size of the stadium can't be fully appreciated from outside, as the pitch is somewhat lower than the surrounding ground level. But its vastness can be gauged from the record attendance here of over 68,000. However, the life of this terrace, at the time the visitors' end, and the side opposite the main stand is about to come to an end, with new seated enclosures as replacements. With the seemingly endless rows of concrete steps and the labyrinth of steel in the roof gone, so will disappear one of the last great covered standing terraces. Sitting, not standing, is now the name of the game. A memory of years gone by is represented by a half-time scoreboard, and also in the past St Andrews has seen European Fairs Cup action. But this remarkable trophy was awarded in 1978 for the somewhat obscure La Linea tournament, which was played for in Spain.
Birmingham City, I suppose the most exasperating time at Birmingham City was seeing Johnny Haynes, who was captain of England and Fulham at the time, being sent off after having a fight with Bertie Auld, and Maurice Cook got involved, and as he ran towards the incident, Bertie Auld hit him straight on the chin and knocked him out, and there were 3 people got sent off on the same day at Birmingham. They were a tough team to play against.
Villa Park is one of England's most famous grounds, and in common with other big stadiums around the country, new roofs and stands have been built. But on the outside, tradition has been maintained, for the complete facade along the Trinity Road side has only been superficially changed over the past 90 years or so. Villa is steeped in history, and it was here that the whole concept of league football was conceived in 1888 by the club's former president, William McGregor. The previous uncovered terrace, arguably the largest at any ground, has now been completely roofed over, prior to being converted into a seated area. And so big is the Villa Park Stadium that even the shallowest enclosure, alongside Whitton Lane, is more imposing than the biggest at many other grounds.
Cowards. Troyd against Bold in the centre. Platt. Oh, he's done it brilliantly. Wonderful goal. David Platt. A great year it's been for him. And Villa break free from the shackles to have a corner. Daly, maybe Villa will score from it. Derek Mountfield, they have!
If you wish to see a modern and well-developed ground, but one with its heart still in the past, then Villa Park should be your goal.
It's a long way down the M1 now.
What, to London?
Yes, another brand new ground.
Where's that?
Millwall's new den.
One of the most recent of new grounds can be found in southeast London. But Millwall's former home will never be forgotten, as the fans demonstrated with this packed house present for the last match at the old Den.
The old Den was a wonderful stadium. in its own right. It had a tremendous character. It was an intimidating place for opposing teams and opposing supporters to come to. And it was very much home for Millwall and for their supporters since 1910. But now we're into the modern era. This is an all-seater stadium. As we mentioned, there are no struts, no stanchions, no barriers which in any way restrict people's view. As you can see, people have to sit down to watch their football these days. That's a contentious issue, obviously, but you know, you really can't make a comparison. This is a stadium for the 21st century. The dugouts do obscure about 2 rows of seats, which probably would be about 20 in all. The reason for that being that initially the plans were for the dugouts to be sunk to a lower level, but when our manager Mick McCarthy saw the plans, he decided he didn't want to be looking at his players' knees all the time. So the dugout is at the normal level, as a result of which the seats directly behind the dugout are usually occupied by junior players, members of staff who can peer through the gap between the roof and the dugout wall. But you're looking at a capacity of around 20,130, completely unrestricted view. Obviously the pitch is in its first year, and we've been a bit unfortunate in that December of 1993 and January of 1994 we had torrential rain, and you can see a problem area down there which has basically been caused by the fact that the sunlight, such as it's been this winter, hasn't really got to it and dried it out. Now, for a pitch which had been down longer, I don't think this would have been such a problem. But I think you'll find that come the beginning of the 94-95 season, when that pitch has been reseeded in the summer, you won't have a problem. Well, we've got 32 executive boxes to start with over in the East Stand. In the old ground we had 3. We've got a massive executive area down under this stand here, the main stand, the West Stand, which can be divided off on a match day. That's used by directors, guests. There's a restaurant there, there's an executive club, but it can also be opened out during the week for functions to accommodate over 600 people. This is very much a club which draws its support from its local community, from the local area. Clearly, the big London clubs like Arsenal and Spurs and the big Northern Giants, Manchester United and Liverpool, draw their support from all over the country. And whilst we do receive letters from all over the world from supporters who, for one reason or another, have become Millwall fans, we do predominantly draw our support from this area, and obviously the Isle of Dogs, which is where the club originated, just north of the river. People's fathers used to stand on the terraces at the Den and their grandfather before them, and I think it was a wrench to leave the old place, because it, you know, it had held a host of memories for people, and you know, the very character of the place was epitomised by players like Barry Kitchener and Harry Cripps. The thought of coming to an all-seater stadium, and we mentioned the all-seater controversy, and I think it might be worth making the point that we here at Millwall would have been quite happy to have had some part of this stadium terraced area, by virtue of the fact that we know a lot of our supporters like to stand and watch football. But there was never a chance of that once Lord Justice Taylor's report came out following the Hillsborough disaster. The ruling is now that we have to have all-seater stadia, and so we were amongst the first to get our house in order in that respect. And I think it's given us a stadium which is not just going to be for football, but hopefully other events in the future. I mean, we've already had a major World Championship boxing contest here, and there'll be concerts and other events which you really do need all-seater facilities in order to hold.
Millwall has changed so much. I mean, the new Den is absolutely magnificent. To go to the old Den was a real experience. If you came away from there with a win, you didn't bring your coach away.
Fulham Football Club may be going through a difficult patch at present, but it would be hard to find a ground with more character than Craven Cottage. It's the epitome of a real football ground, the likes of which have all but disappeared elsewhere. The club and the ground hold fond memories for many of their former players, as Alan Mullery relates.
I joined when I left school at 15 years of age, and coming down the main road, Findlay Street, that leads into Craven Cottage, I followed the England captain who just got off a trolley bus, who was Johnny Haynes at the time, and he was my hero, and still is. But to follow him down Findlay Street into the football club that I was going to join and love was just another thing, and to walk into the ground and be offered a job as a ground staff boy. And I used to sweep the terraces at this place and do everything else. But my first job basically was to help the groundsman on that morning, the first morning that I arrived, to collect all the paper, because the stands weren't here in those days. It was just terracing mostly, just on 3 sides. And it was a bit windy, and I had to collect all the waste paper on the pitch. And there was a five-a-side taking place. And the groundsman told me to get in amongst them and pick this paper up. And I was told indignantly by a big goalkeeper called Ken Eukins to get off the playing surface and wait until the game had finished to pick the paper up. As I walked off, the groundsman sent me back in again. As I walked back in again, the goalkeeper sent me off again. And then the groundsman sent me back in again. And as I was standing there talking to the groundsman, the goalkeeper came over and hit him on the chin. And the motor mower started going up the pitch, and I had to chase the motor mower to try and keep it in straight lines while they attended the groundsman. My second day, which was a sort of Monday come, because we had the game on the Saturday, and my second day was going with a little guy called Jack Gordon. I'll always remember his name. And we walked under the old stand, and he had a wheelbarrow and a tin in it and a couple of shovels. And I said, well, what are we doing this morning? He said, well, you'll see. He said, we've got a few buns laying on the floor. He said, from the little kiosks, you know, that serve food on match days. And he said, collect those buns, he said, or the remnants of the buns, he said, and he started spreading this sort of mustard type stuff on them. And we laid them by the kiosk, you know, and he said, come on, he said, we're going out for a cup of tea for an hour. So off we went underneath the stand and sat in his room and had a cup of tea, and then an hour later we came out, and there were these rats walking around like as if they were drunk. And he picked up a spade and walked over to one of the rats and absolutely splattered it on the floor, shoveled it up, put it in the wheelbarrow, and he said, right, it's your turn now. I mean, I'd never literally seen a rat, let alone kill one. But they were 2 quite unusual days, you know, my first 2 days at Fulham as a ground staff boy. So many at Fulham, special characters, I mean, amazing people. Starting off with one, Tosh Chamberlain. I mean, I came here just before I signed for Fulham when I was about 14 and a half to see a game, and sat over by the cottage on some seats there. And the game was going on. This number 11 walked off the pitch, sat down next to me, and asked the fellow on the terraces for a cigarette. And he lit this cigarette up and sat next to me for a couple of minutes smoking this cigarette while the game was taking place. Johnny Haynes, who was this wonderful passer of the ball, was going one way. He smacked this ball about 50 yards to the outside left, but the outside left wasn't there. He was sitting on the bench next to me having this cigarette. And he walked back on the pitch, put the cigarette on the floor, stamped it out with his boot, and turned to Johnny Haynes and said, when I'm out here, you never pass the ball. When I'm sitting down having a cigarette, he said, you always pass the ball to me. And the crowd were in raptures. I mean, that was Tosh Chamberlain. You had George Cohen, who they used to call the rabbi, but George wasn't Jewish. And every time he used to go down the wing, they used to shout, go on the rabbi, and George would get right away down to the byline and smack it straight into the crowd, you know, it was amazing. Jimmy Langley, probably the second most popular player at this football club next to Johnny Haynes, had a wonderful long throw, Jim, and when it came to the opponent's 18-yard box, Jim used to bend down and wait for the crowd to cheer him and bend down and do his laces up and things like this, which were never undone, but he professed to say they were, so he'd get more of a cheer as he got up and walked down to throw the ball in. Roy Bentley was a wonderful character, extremely hard player. Said few words on the pitch, had a dreadful, wicked sense of humour off the pitch, you know. Jimmy Hill, who's now the chairman of the football club, you know, a wonderful sense of humour and pride in playing for the club. Maurice Cook, who never ever achieved really what his ability should have achieved in football. Some fantastic characters.
The most famous feature is, without doubt, the picturesque cottage, which is situated at one corner of the ground. Famous players of the past once used it as their dressing room. The cottage is a listed building, as is the old Stevenage Road stand, which to date has ensured that the ground remains. Long before it became a football ground, Craven Cottage was the site of Anne Boleyn's hunting ground, and the one reminder of that bygone age is this protected tree close to the River Thames.
We've had a good look at Craven Cottage and Fulham. Let's make our journey over to North London now and do the same thing with Tottenham Hotspur.
The proud cockerel at White Hart Lane surveys the scene of the much-changed Tottenham Hotspur ground. Alan Mullery comes down the Players' Tunnel once more to see the modern stadium where he made so many appearances, both as a visitor and later in a Spurs shirt.
I couldn't really believe the vastness of the place. I'd played here quite a few times, you know, with Fulham in the First Division. But the immense size of the place when nobody was in there. It's changed now, but I mean then it was it could hold 65,000 people. It's not the same as when I first came. You know, there was a lot of nostalgia when I first came here. You know, now I look at it now, it's a magnificent stadium. It's a superb stadium for viewing of all parts. But it's not the Tottenham Hotspur I knew 25 years ago. Dave Mackay was such a great player. As he used to come out the tunnel with the ball, he would literally kick this ball 50 yards in the air, and as he'd chase after it, he'd catch it on his foot, walk over to the best player in the opposing side and say, you might as well have a kick at this ball now because you're not going to get a kick in the game. Relative to other grounds, especially in London, Fulham and Queen's Park Rangers, they all seem so much smaller compared to Tottenham. It was always seemed vast. There was so much space to play your football on.
At last, Charlton are based back at the Valley, but only after a long traumatic period for the club, as stadium manager Roy King explains.
There's been dramatic changes at the Valley since September '85 when the club left. Obviously over the period of 7 years the ground lay empty and it got into a bad state of deterioration. Yeah, it was a long struggle, hard struggle, 7 years, and eventually with the help of the fans they raised over £1 million. We finally got back and yeah, I think you could say everyone's pleased to be home. It always was a good surface here, and I think you'll find that Colin Powell, the ex-player who played down here, now the groundsman, is got a good surface. He actually came, I think, was runner-up in the Groundsman of the Year award last year. We've got an unusual situation where we've got temporary accommodation at the moment in the north corner of the west side. But as I say, over the next couple of years, we will build a new stand there, and they'll be incorporated in the stand. The east stand, which is the one that's under construction at the moment, we had quite a lot of difficulty with that one because it's built on a natural bank and there are no exits from the rear, so the exits had to be from either end. Now that terrace held 45,000 people in its heyday. We're now restricted to 6,000. That's the maximum amount of people we can get on it, and that's purely and simply because there are only 2 exits either end. So that really does restrict on how many people you can get out. We also had the restriction of a height problem at the back where we weren't allowed to go over 2 metres above the gardens at the back. So that is why we now have a 6,000 stand on a site that once held 45,000 people. It brings with it its own problems, all-seater. People who, you buy a ticket, you're sitting next to someone you don't particularly like, you find out after 5 minutes you're stuck with it, you can't move around the grounds. But I think overall, I think it's got to be the way forward.
Charlton, I was the manager there for a year under Mike Glickstein, who was a marvellous chairman to me. And it was a wonderful ground because it held the largest capacity in London for some time, which was over 70-odd thousand people.
Football fans familiar with the ground of the newest members of the Football League, Wycombe Wanderers, won't recognise this ground view. It is in fact Lokes Park, their former home, and this is the last game there. A ground the club occupied for nearly 100 years. This last match in May 1990 saw a host of former international stars appear on the famous sloping pitch before a packed house. With nothing at stake, the spectators were treated to an exhibition game full of goals and no little skill from both teams. After the final whistle had sounded to mark the end of Lokes Park, supporters took home their own mementos of the ground. Meanwhile, work was nearing completion at Adams Park, the Buckinghamshire club's new home, which is set in an industrial estate, but which still retains a rural atmosphere. Adams Park is a small but well-designed stadium that would, in a short space of time, be hosting Football League matches. A few months later, the crowds turned up for the ground opening match. The game was a friendly encounter with Nottingham Forest, who came complete with many of their famous personalities. Adams Park was formally opened on the 29th of April 1991 by His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent.
I'm sure this splendid new ground will help to realise that. So in declaring Adams Park officially open, I wish your club great success for the future.
Unfortunately, the weather for the match that night, Wycombe Wanderers versus Barnet in the GM Vauxhall Conference, was poor, but this didn't dampen the enthusiasm of the fans.
Paul Wilson, and now to Keith Durham, picking the ball up against former teammates and making tracks towards goal and putting Gary Ball through. And with only 1 minute, 20 seconds on the clock, Barnet, incredibly, have taken the lead. And really Carter showing the sort of form that has kept him out of the Barnet side so far when that ball came into him. Mickey Nuttall, he's got West running ahead of him. Tries to come inside Howell. Now it's back out to West. Puts the cross in, and it's dropped. Nuttall must score. Some consolation for Wycombe Wanderers. 4 minutes remaining.
A brand new ground gave the incentive to a winning team, and the Wycombe players were soon at the recording studios to cut a record to mark their appearance in the final of the FA Trophy. Wembley Stadium, the goal of every footballer and fan alike. A stadium first used for a Wembley final in 1923, antiquated by modern standards, but still the most famous football arena in the world. There can surely be no player who has appeared at Wembley who hasn't retained the memory of their first sight of the Twin Towers and that walk out onto the Wembley turf. Dressing rooms. Imagine the pre-match tension, the nerves tingling in anticipation. The thrill as you make your appearance before the fans.
is in the wall for Wickham. It's a sizable Runcorn wall, which Arthur Williams is trying to line up. Cousins, he's done it! Jason Cousins has scored in the first minute of the FA Trophy final. Carroll. Andy Kerr! 2-0. On by Anderson. Brady's ball. Shot comes in. And Runcorn are back in the game. Thompson. Cousins. Lovely football by Wickham. Carroll. It's there! And David Carroll has made it 4-1. That's it. And Wickham Wanderers have done it.
The presentation to the winners. The celebrations after winning at Wembley. For Wickham, this Wembley visit was to be their last game as a non-league club. For us, Wembley marks the end of a journey to the football grounds of England.